Joined now by Alec Lasley of the Hoosier.com. What's going on, man?
Not much. How are you doing?
Oh, just hanging out, just trying to do a little reading, looking West Coast maps, reacquainting myself with Los Angeles. No, it's this. I've said earlier, to me, I still have not found a place where to put this yet because I don't want to overthink it. But this is of all the things that have happened in the last 2 years, COVID, NIL, transfer portal, all previous conference alignment, all of that. This to me still seems bigger than all of that. And we had been wondering what the Big Ten was going to do because they kept getting caught sitting on their hands. And then finally they look like, wow, they just hit a grand slam. Now, I don't know how much credit Kevin Warren and the Big Ten get, or was these two institutions being smart and saying, you know what, let's reach out and talk to the big boys, because I mentioned earlier, the Big Ten now has teams and TV markets in Washington, New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles. That is an incredible boon because they are in the process right now of rewriting their media packages that will be, I don't even know. It was already $2 billion. The last one, Alec, this one I can't imagine how big this next contract will be and how much. Indiana would receive what, 51 million the last time. Their share could double easily.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the biggest kind of reason for this was obviously they needed to bring in some additional schools. I feel like at this point, every conference, whether they're talking about it or not, is looking elsewhere to bring in one or two additional programs and big time programs to enhance that conference. And it just shows that we're going closer and closer to either two mega conferences or basically getting rid of those non-Power 5 conferences and going with just 5, 20, 25 team conferences here to basically just enhance football and basketball. And at the end of the day, everyone kind of forgets about the other sports involved here, but this is a move for the revenue generating sports, for football and basketball, obviously. And for the Big Ten, this was right in the middle, like you said, of them trying to renegotiate this contract. I think it was the SEC was up with CBS, so there were even more networks that were going to try to with the Big Ten that had obviously proved over the last few years to be one of the biggest moneymakers when it came to TV rights, but also when it came to some of the top teams in the country outside of the SEC. Obviously, when you have Alabama and Georgia there, and for them to do this in the midst of that, there's a reason why they hadn't upped to that contract yet, because this was going on most likely in the behind the scenes. I think Kevin Warren does have a lot to do with this. I think for all the negative publicity that he has received, and a lot of times it's been true. He has not done, I would say, a great job up to this point running the Big Ten. But this is a monumental move, and I think a lot bigger than when you look at Texas and Oklahoma leaving the Big 12 to join the SEC. I think making it basically across the entire country, of, like you said, having the New York market stretch all the way into the LA market was never involved before. Not only is huge for the Big Ten, but also for college athletics. And when you look at obviously the football side of things, there's a lot that kind of changes when it comes to that. I think way more than basketball. But if you want to look at it from a basketball perspective, you had UCLA, who is in a very similar spot as Indiana over the last kind of decade here, of having obviously that rich history and that rich tradition Obviously, the 11 national championships that UCLA has had, none recently though. But you bring them in, and now you have potentially a home and home every single year or every other year with UCLA and Indiana. Not only does that just stir up even more national recognition for the conference, but it just brings a different level of competitiveness to the bin that I think you really haven't seen outside of a couple rivalries, here and there with Michigan, Michigan State, obviously IU, Purdue, but those I think have kind of lost their national uh, recognition in terms of Purdue obviously dominating Indiana for much of the last decade. Michigan hasn't done great against Michigan State over the last decade, and I think outside of the Midwest, not a lot of people truly care about Ohio State and Michigan rivalry when it comes to the basketball side of things. So bringing in a USC for football and a UCLA for basketball, I think does wonders for this conference and really does a lot for college athletics.
Yeah, and speaking of scheduling, it's going to create a scheduling challenge for the Big Ten, and one that's going to be a fun one, or that they'll enjoy. I'm certainly, because of some of the matchups that we're looking at on both sides. Well, we're just going to be talking about football and basketball right now. I mean, not that there aren't some other great matchups, like I said, in soccer and other things there are, but I'm talking about on the large scale here in the Big Ten. You're thinking about USC at Michigan or Ohio State, and vice versa. UCLA, I mentioned earlier, UCLA at in Bloomington, Indiana at Pauley Pavilion. You know the Bruins coming to Assembly Hall. Now that's not going to be. It's getting to with what now? What, 16 teams? They were already playing a 20-game schedule. So you're going to have more teams that you only play once. And I'm going to imagine, especially the West Coast teams, probably not going to be home and homes a lot with those during the season. It may be an alternating year thing. Like even in basketball, they'll probably be able to play everybody once. Well, they play everybody once, but like I said, you may find it to where you're going to UCLA one year and they're not coming to Bloomington, and they may come the following year, but it could lend some scheduling things of that issue, which that's just going to be part of it. But that, again, you're increasing the footprint, the recruiting footprint. Not that Indiana wasn't already going national. This knocks down more walls, more barriers for kids, Alec, that maybe they're out west and they're like, yeah, it's so far. Well, nothing's far anymore. Now this just took all the fences down, all the barriers. And I think this is another thing that is going to help Indiana basketball quickly get back to being Indiana. And this is going to be a benefit to IU, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, when you look at the basketball side of things, I think kind of everything that Indiana's been doing over the last, 3 to 6 months has really put them on an upward trajectory. I think even if, it wasn't a UCLA that came here, I think, at the end of the day, Indiana's still gaining a lot of that national respect that they didn't have. And we've seen that now with the scheduling. They're doing everything the right way. We've talked about that numerous times. I think it becomes a really interesting point when you look at the football side of things for Indiana. Obviously did a great job over the last 5 years to get to where they are now. Last year, everyone knows the step back that they took in a huge way. One that, is something that you can't really look past, regardless of injuries that they did have. And now you bring in potentially facing, USC, every other year, however the scheduling kind of works out, whether that's them coming here, whether that's you going out there. And a team that was fighting for 8 wins every single year now has still a UCLA team, even though they have not been very good over the last few years. A UCLA team and a USC team that play a much different style of football, a much quicker style of football. one that you don't see outside of Ohio State in the Big Ten. And there's a reason why Ohio State is atop the Big Ten almost every single season, because they have the top talent, they have the top athletes, and they have the fastest players around the country that go there. And you get that with those skill position players that Indiana has struggled with in the past. And that's something that I think is definitely a concern for a program, like I said, that's trying to get to 8 wins. It's not like they're consistently at 8 wins or even wins for the majority of this last decade. Or if they were, maybe it's a different story. Maybe it's not as much of an impact for them when it comes to on-field production. But when you look at a team that now is coming off of a 2-win season, obviously, USC and UCLA not joining this upcoming year, but in 2 years when they do join, this Indiana program could look entirely different, obviously for the good and the bad. But now you face those two teams and really have a difficult time pinpointing an Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Michigan State, USC potentially, Iowa, depending who the crossover games are, assuming they stick with divisions. And now you look at that Indiana schedule that's probably going to get away with the cupcake games to start the season of the Idahos and the Western Kentuckys or anything like that. And you look at that schedule and you struggle to find 7 wins consistently. And I think that's the biggest concern for Indiana moving forward when it comes to the football side. Basketball, they're going to be fine. But football is the biggest question mark, I think, with this move.